Usually, companies only remake legendary games that were critically acclaimed bestsellers in their own time. After all, those projects are fairly safe bets because the gameplay loop and story are proven to be a winning formula, and there's already a built-in audience. So, what happens when we remake a game that had an, at best, lukewarm reception when it originally came out? We get titles like Yooka-Replaylee. I backed the original Yooka-Laylee on Kickstarter 10 years ago. Man, has it really been that long? It was billed as the spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie from that game's original development team, and while the game had issues, I gave the original release an overall positive review. Yes, Yooka was derivative of Banjo, closer to an imitation than an evolution, but that was also exactly what was advertised, and in the middle of a 3D collectathon platformer drought, I was happy enough with what we got. That context has thankfully changed in the decades since. We are getting a steady stream of 3D platformers. Even Bubsy is getting another go-around, and Yooka-Replaylee has come out shortly after the incredibly well-received Donkey Kong Bonanza. The original game simply wouldn't hold up against today's competition. It admittedly didn't grab me enough to 100% it at the time, or return to it since its debut, so the developers have made some drastic changes for this remake. Let's explore this new version to see what's been improved and whether it moves Yooka-Laylee into must-play territory. Let's start with a high-level overview of the changes. The story has been updated, now told in retrospect by the leading duo. We get new context that tells us Yooka and Laylee aren't native to the game's setting. They shipwrecked here while looking for treasure. It's clarified that the one book, which our villain Capital B was hunting down, is magical. Anything written in the book becomes true. We'll come back to that shortly. We also learn that vacuuming up all of the world's books was Plan B after targeting the one book specifically failed. It's now explicitly stated that while our villain, Capital B, has the one book in his possession, he can't use it because its pages, our main collectible called Pages, have been scattered. The Pagie doors, which locked off new worlds until we had completed enough objectives, are then put in place by the villains. When we open a door, we're actually delivering Pages to Capital B as his unknowing and unpaid interns. That creates some logical issues. For example, Capital B still disguises himself as the casino's banker and still gives us Pages in return for tokens. If his aim is to collect Pages in order to use the one book, why would he give us Pages so that we can then deliver them back to him later on? Just keep hold of them and let Yooka grab the ones you don't already have. We even get scenes showing Capital B leaving for and returning from the casino to reinforce and draw attention to his stint as the banker. Other than that, things play out in more or less the same way as before. Capital B's motivations aren't explored beyond simple greed, although some of his dialogue lands differently when you consider behind-the-scenes issues. Yes, we're going to talk about it in a dedicated section. The ending is still somewhat flat. We beat the bad guy and the day is saved. Roll credits. All of the story uplifts are front-loaded, fizzling out as the game goes on. The new opening also comes with a new area where we get a more linear and straightforward tutorial. This is necessary because one of the plot revisions is Laylee writing in the one book, asking for all of our duo's moves to be unlocked from the start. This is a massive gameplay change that's half-heartedly implemented. The idea behind unlocking moves gradually in both the original Yooka-Laylee and the Banjo games that they succeed is that the player's moveset, and therefore the game's complexity, expands as the player's comfort and skill level increases. It helps fight fatigue as there's always something new. I'm an e-learning specialist in my day job, and one thing I have to be conscious of is cognitive load. If I give a learner everything at once, I'll overwhelm them. Instead, I have to devise an information hierarchy, considering dependencies, priorities, and frequency of use, to then introduce one element at a time in an appropriate and effective sequence. I need to let the learner become comfortable with a concept or skill before building on it. In Replaylee's approach, everything is thrown at us all at once, meaning none of our abilities get time in the spotlight, time to embed, or focused opportunities to be practiced. For the most part. The level designs have only been updated so much. This means that when we get to, for example, the casino, the challenges are still built around the original game's pacing and the idea that we've just unlocked the reptile roll's boost ability, so we can now break glass or dash under timed doors. Originally, this would have been a eureka moment that would take us back to an earlier race against Nimble, which we can now win using the boost. In Replaylee, we can't consider all of our options when faced with a challenge or puzzle because we aren't fully aware of all of our abilities or the different ways we can utilise them. That leads to frustration and feeling cheated. We can find ourselves asking, how was I supposed to know that? That change ripples out, impacting other areas of the game. For example, Trouser used to teach us new moves, so what does he do now? He sells permanent upgrades such as extra health and one new costume for each world in exchange for the quills we can find in each level. Vendy, meanwhile, still sells tonics, essentially gameplay modifiers and visual filters, but now also sells cosmetics using a secondary currency, quids. While there are still a set 150 quills per level, often hidden away, quids behave like Mario's coins. They paint trails through stages and respawn. This not only helps us navigate the worlds by guiding us to points of interest, it also makes the levels feel more populated. Speaking of, where each level previously had 25 pages, they now have 50. The game's total page count has increased from 145 to 300. We also have a much needed in-game tracker that shows us which pages we're missing. I actually revisited my old Yooka-Laylee save file a couple of years ago, hoping to 100% it and get the Platinum Trophy, but the original game didn't list which pages I did and didn't already have, causing me to give up on that pursuit. This simple change fixes that problem. Unfortunately, pages aren't created equally. Taking cues from Mario Odyssey, defeating bosses provides a triple pagey, while minigames like Kartos' Minecart Challenges and Rextro's arcade games award up to 3 pages depending on our performance. At the other end of the spectrum, we can get pages for finding a shiny spot on the floor and doing a ground pound. Several pagey tasks are also copy-pasted multiple times within the same level, such as flying these pigs to their destinations. Like Odyssey, the frequency and quantity of pages does make the game feel faster paced, with more extrinsic rewards being drip-fed to us, but at the cost of each pagey having less impact and significance. They become forgettable. Having all of our moves out of the gate means that we can fully complete any world on our first visit. Usually, I prefer this. Regular viewers will know that I prefer Spyro 1 over its sequel because I can enter a world, pick it clean, and leave feeling satisfied, whereas Spyro 2 always has a roadblock that needs me to return later after learning a new move. Replaylee even makes it easier to stay in one world until everything is done by adding Mark the Bookmark to every stage as a series of fast travel points. Sorely needed as the original's mechanic of first visiting a smaller version of a world, and then expanding it with new areas later on, has been removed. Now we get the full level right off the bat. We can even pay Mark to have him reveal the locations of any pages we're missing, but sadly not other collectibles like quills, ghostwriters, pirate treasure, etc. Mark's presence is very much welcome, as we no longer get the ability to fly anytime, anywhere. In this remake, we can only fly for a limited time by interacting with a power-up. To be fair, being able to fly kind of broke the original game and allowed us to cheese most of the challenges, so limiting it makes sense. On the other hand, the final level, Galleon Galaxy, is still laid out as a series of islands in space that assumes, and more or less requires, us to have the ability to fly. Thankfully, the game otherwise feels much nicer to play. Our leading duo feels much more responsive, and their various moves chain into each other smoothly. It makes it hard to return to the original, which now feels quite stiff by comparison. 2 other big gameplay changes come in the form of Kartos and Rextro. The former's minecart minigame has been simplified, with fewer controls and projectiles that now follow the curvature of the tracks. It still requires perfect runs to get all possible pages though. Rexstro's assortment of games have now been replaced with a top-down puzzle platformer. It's consistent, its stakes escalate, and the concept gets evolved and iterated on with new challenges, but it comes at the cost of the variety we had before. In Yooka-Laylee, if we didn't like one of Rexstro's games, we could at least take solace in only having to play it once. In Yooka-Replaylee, if we don't like this new replacement game, I'm sorry to say we're stuck with it. I'm happy to call Kartos an improvement, but I'm somewhat torn on Rexstro. Unfortunately, Yooka-Replaylee's various quality of life upgrades and lower difficulty contribute to a macro-level pacing issue. In the original, we needed 100 of the game's 145 pages to reach the final boss and finish the game. Here, we only need 120 of the game's 300 pages. That shifts us from needing to be a very nice 69% of the game to only needing to engage with 40% of it. With the hub world and each main level containing 50 pages each, I was in a position to reach the end boss by the end of World 2. I could have chosen to entirely skip the 3rd, 4th, and 5th levels. Ideally, the revised threshold should have been proportionately scaled to around 200 pages. On a similar note, the Platinum Trophy is absurdly easy to get. We don't have to be anywhere near 100% completion for it to pop. I'm not a trophy hunter, but a premature platinum does lessen my personal incentive to go back for the last few pages and quills I missed. There are areas where I think the remake doesn't go far enough. The casino was one of my least favourite levels in the original game, and that remains the case here. We can get the helicopter transformation very easily and early into the stage, which allows us to go anywhere we want, skipping platforming challenges altogether. Completing objectives still gives us tokens rather than pages, but one pagey costs 5 tokens, and each objective gives 5 tokens anyway, so all we're doing is adding a step for the sake of a gag that isn't funny and creates a minor plot hole. The main hub of Ivory Towers is still split into sections separated by loading zones, so although we now have Mark for fast travel, we can only fast travel within our current zone. If we want to go to a different part of Ivory Towers, we need to warp to a mark near an exit, go to the next area, and then open the map and warp again to where we actually want to be. We might have to do this multiple times if we want to go from, for example, World 5 to World 1 as we pass through multiple loading areas on the way. Phase 2 of the final boss is, well, just look at the footage. There's a tad much going on. Graphically, I don't see much of an upgrade. Yooka-Replaylee really highlights how console generations have been suffering from diminishing returns. You would expect a remake of a 10-year-old game to be transformative, but it sadly isn't. I don't think this is so much the game's fault, more just evidence that older games still hold up pretty well today. It's especially true in Yooka-Laylee's case, as it had a cartoony and stylized aesthetic anyway. Normally, my reviews focus on the end product rather than a game's development and marketing, but there's some behind-the-scenes factors, good and bad, that became very public and might impact someone's purchasing decision. The good news is that Playtonic looked after their legacy supporters. The original Kickstarter backers are still in the credits. Look, there's me! We're getting a free digital soundtrack, and owners of the original game got a 30% discount on this remake, as long as we have a digital copy still in the same ecosystem, i.e. PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, and for the Switch specifically, use the North American eShop. The price is very reasonable at $24.99 GBP in an era where Donkey Kong Bonanza, another 3D collectathon platformer, would cost us $58.99 GBP digitally. With the loyalty discount, I paid just $15.99 GBP on the PlayStation Store, and my playthrough clocked in at around 12 hours. That's a great deal in my opinion. We're also getting a physical release, albeit not day and date with the digital version and at a higher price point, with Playtonic confirming the Switch 2 version is the full game on the cartridge, not a game keycard. There are pieces of artwork throughout the game that was submitted by fans via social media. Depending on your stance, you might see this as a fun and cool way to involve and showcase a fan community. Or you might see it as taking advantage of the player base to get free artwork and unpaid labour. I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but if I didn't acknowledge the debate in the video, there would be someone in the comments bringing it up. One thing that made me hesitate before buying the game, and caused me to consider boycotting it before talking to a friend who was impacted, is the fact that much of its development team were made redundant a few months before launch. Playtonic might have looked after its fans, but it didn't look after its own staff members. It completely changes how lines about running out of budget land. Gags about making people redundant suddenly seem incredibly inappropriate, and the overarching theme of fighting a selfish and greedy CEO takes on a meta-level irony. It negatively impacted my enjoyment of the game and actively took me out of the experience, reminding me of the circumstances surrounding the game's development on multiple occasions. The game's supposed charm, humour, and whimsy instead came across as tone-deaf and disrespectful. Playtonic, you are throwing stones in glass houses. You can't punch up at capitalism while being guilty of the very things you're mocking. Throughout my playthrough, I couldn't help thinking that while Yooka-Replaylee was a huge improvement over the original release, I would have preferred Playtonic to show us the lessons it had learned in a sequel instead. After all, 10 years in, we only have 3 games in this series, one of which is a remake. At the very least, the team could now carry what they've learned into a new game. Except that they can't, because the people with the knowledge, skills, and experience, the people who made Replaylee so much better than the original outing, aren't working at Playtonic anymore and can't contribute to whatever comes next. That means the quality of any new entries is a complete unknown because they will be made by a different team. I could make a whole video about the game industry being an absolute mess, but this is a prime example of leadership cutting off their noses to spite their faces by undervaluing what they have and focusing solely on the short term. Some people will be comfortable saying that's the nature of business. There's no such thing as a forever job anymore, and those employees got paid for the work that they did. Others, myself included, will be angry that the people who did the work and made the game got let go, while the higher-ups enjoy the benefits of their labour. It's up to you whether that informs your purchasing decision. This is a judgment-free zone. After all, for all my complaining and grandstanding here, I still bought the game. I'm part of the problem. To summarise, Yooka-Replaylee is now the game that Yooka-Laylee should have been from the start. It's very reasonably priced, especially given the current landscape, and cheaper still if you own the original. It's not perfect, you can effectively skip almost 2/3 of the game, the difficulty is pitched too low, and new moves are no longer introduced, taught, and mastered one at a time, making it difficult to appreciate and understand our options. But it's a solid title all around. I would have preferred a sequel instead. I wish the team that made this were retained and able to bring us some more great games, but this is the timeline and reality we find ourselves in. On a wider scale, it is an interesting case study on remaking games that got a middling or even poor reception the first time around. Those titles have more room for improvement and more unrealised potential than games that were already considered masterpieces. How about games that only gained a cult following and didn't hit the mainstream getting a second chance, such as the fantastic Trails in the Sky remake? Is it a safer bet commercially? No, but I certainly find that proposition more exciting than the remakes we usually get. As always, thanks for watching, and an extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters who are Crow, Tiny Jericho, DuckyGo, Francis T218, Deliberator, and Mr. Terry Chaos. You know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video, hype it, whatever that is, and stick around to watch more of my stuff. I'll see you soon.